Hey everyone, welcome back to Horsetooth Cinema. So instead of a review today, I figured I would do a little bit of a different kind of video that I've been wanting to do for a while now. That is like ranking videos, so like ranking certain directors or certain movies that all fit a certain category. And today, since the new Batman movie was released not that long ago, I figured I would go ahead and rank a lot of the Batman movies. Batman is a character that I kind of grew up with. It was my favorite superhero growing up, and pretty much all these movies except for a couple of them, I've seen them more times than I care to admit. Just as a disclosure, this won't include any of the Ben Affleck Batman movies because I don't think they ever got their own solo movie, if I remember right. And also, I just they didn't look good. And this also will not include the Lego Batman, which I am a fan of Lord and Miller, who I think did that movie, but I have not seen that yet. I think that's all of them. Let me know if I missed any of them. So there's 10 of them that I'll be going through here. So at number 10 we have Batman Forever, which was directed by Joel Schumacher. So the Schumacher Batmans are kind of like their own special thing. I like generally that they exist. Joel Schumacher is a very eccentric director. He kind of likes everything on screen to be like a circus, which does work a little bit for like the comic book spirit of Batman. And both of his Batman movies have a sort of so bad it's good feel to them. Like, when you're watching Batman Forever, it does, there are a lot of scenes that are just unintentionally hilarious. Although not as much as Batman and Robin, which I'll be getting to a little bit later in the list. But I feel like that this movie just kind of, there are actually times, surprisingly, where it takes itself really seriously, like when it talks about Batman's origin story. I just think that scene especially is executed really poorly, and it doesn't work tonally at all with what the movie is going for. I don't really know why it exists. And in general, this movie kind of feels like it has one foot rooted in Tim Burton's Batman, which is comic booky and a little bit silly, but it's also a lot darker than the Schumacher Batman. And it has the other foot fully in this circus camp Schumacher thing that he wants to go for, but that balance, I think those two things juxtaposed against one another don't really work. And just thinking about all these movies on this list, I think this is definitely the one that I would want to rewatch the least as an adult. Number 9, I'm gonna put Chris Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises. You might be thinking it's a bit low on the list. A lot of people do really like this movie. And I grew up liking it for the most part. But as I've gotten a little bit older, I've started to notice mostly just how many plot holes there are. And I think this is by far the worst of the Nolan trilogy. Like, it's kind of unbelievable what a big gap there is, I think, between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, and then this movie. Yeah, like I mentioned, there's just so many plot holes. Off the top of my head, there's how does Bane know where the armory is? How did he actually figure that out? Bruce Wayne and Fox tried to keep that very secret. It's never actually revealed how he discovered that. After Bruce Wayne gets out of the prison that he climbs out of, how does he actually get back to Gotham from there? Not only does he have no money and he's seemingly in the middle of nowhere, but Bruce Wayne is kind of viewed as a recluse, so there's not really a lot of help that he can just immediately call, and also that would kind of, reveal that he's Batman anyway. And probably the biggest one for me is how does Batman actually survive the nuclear blast? Now, of course, he doesn't actually survive it. They explain that he, fixed the autopilot so that he would seemingly drop out of the helicopter before it exploded. But a nuclear blast has a massive blast radius, and also the camera, when we see the helicopter fly away, it focuses quite a bit on that helicopter, and you don't see anything jumping out or anything like that. So I feel like he would definitely have to be really close to the center of the blast, and therefore I don't know how he would survive. There's a lot more I could talk about here, but those are the biggest plot holes that just really bug me. And sometimes in a superhero movie, you don't really care so much about that, but because the Nolan ones take themselves so seriously, you kind of have to. And I think that ending in general, how we find out that Batman actually did survive the blast and that we see that he's with Catwoman in Europe at the end of the film, I really don't like that ending. I think it really robs Batman of his arc. He fully sacrificed himself for Gotham, and Gotham didn't realize what they had until it was too late. So yeah, overall, I just think there's so much in this movie that takes itself so seriously like the Nolan ones do, but unlike the other two Nolan movies, this one is just really messy, I think, in terms of the writing. Number 8, we have Batman and Robin, which is a movie that I'm sure most people probably have at the very bottom of their lists. It's widely considered one of the worst movies ever made. And I get that from any technical level, from, the way the movie looks, to how it's directed, to how it's written, yeah, this is an awful movie, but I kind of love it. There's just so much iconic, hilarious shit in this movie. From the bat butt and the bat nipples, literally everything about the three villains. You have Poison Ivy, who's basically just like a porn star. Mr. Freeze just listing off the greatest ice puns that have ever been spoken by anyone.
You're not sending me to the cooler. What killed the dinosaurs?
And then Bane, who is not exactly Bane from The Dark Knight Rises, this terrorist, he's just this, like, Hulk, basically. He knows, like, 2 words. Now, as much as I love all of these things, as aggressively rewatchable as Batman and Robin is, I generally don't think it's a good movie because I don't think Schumacher understands what Batman is. I don't think he understands that this, like, dark and gothic look to, you know, the city and to the characters should be the focal point. And then it has, you know, some cartoony, silly stuff in the backdrop. I think he's kind of inverting it a little bit. As fun as it is to watch, I just don't think he really gets the character and the world that well. But hey, what I love about this movie too is that it fully just embraces what it is. It embraces the camp and everything. And I just wish we could get superhero movies nowadays that were more like this. There's like every superhero movie nowadays is just taken so seriously, and you don't really get these like camp fest type movies anymore. Which might, for some people, might be a good thing, but I would love to see it every once in a while. Staying in the area of campy Batman, at number 7, I'm going with Batman 66. Now, I think this is how you do camp right. Where I mentioned that Schumacher doesn't really understand the dark and gothic aspects of Batman. I don't think the director of this Adam West Batman does either, but the whole plot and everything is kept a lot simpler, and the stakes are a little bit lower, I think. And that allows it to sort of run free with what it is, if that makes any sense at all. Now I have to say, I haven't seen this movie in years. Like, I don't remember when was the last time I saw it. I probably should rewatch it, that would be fun, but as a kid, I kid you not, I saw this dozens of times on like a VHS tape that we had. Like Batman and Robin, there are a lot of really silly, iconic jokes in this movie. Like when they all fight on the submarine at the end, every time somebody gets like thrown off or the submarine or somebody gets punched, there you see literally like a pow, some comic book visual effect there. Of course you have the, some days you can't just get rid of a bomb. And even though this doesn't really understand the like dark aspects of Batman, I think it does understand a lot of the characters really well. Riddler and Joker, while yes, they're very silly, I love the Cesar Romero Joker performance. It's silly, but it gets the, you know, the crazed aspects of Joker right, I think. And probably the best villain in this whole movie is Catwoman. I think this is one of the better portrayals of Catwoman. She's really allowed to use her femininity, her sexiness to sort of like, you know, manipulate Batman and just the characters in general. So yeah, this is a campy, fun time that you can't take too seriously, but I think it's probably executed the best of all of the really silly Batman movies. Number 6, I'm gonna go with Batman 1989. Which was the first film directed by Tim Burton. In general, I think Tim Burton has one of the better aesthetics for Gotham. I think it's the first movie that we've talked about on this list that really gets the look of Gotham right. You have those tall skyscrapers that don't really look anything like a real city, but it looks like something that is straight out of a comic book. And when you combine that with Danny Elfman's amazing whimsical score, I think you just have one of the most fantastic overall vibes for Gotham. With the soundtrack as well, you also have those really good like Prince tracks, like when Joker is in the art museum and he and his goons when they're dancing down the stairs and like graffitiing all the art to a Prince song. That's all great stuff. I think, you know, we're gradually starting to get the tone of Batman a little bit more right, I think. Jack Nicholson's Joker, while very silly, is pretty much perfect for this Tim Burton Batman because it is a lot darker. He actually kills people in very violent ways in this movie, even though it does seem very PG. It's a little cartoony, but it's also really dark, and I think that's getting closer and closer to what I think of as Batman. The main issue with this movie is that I just don't think the writing is very good. I think a lot of the motivations for the characters, especially the Joker, are, you know, really murky and unclear. And I also don't really like the characters of Vicky, or I don't remember what her friend's name is, but the really annoying journalist that she works with. I don't like those characters at all, and I really think it could have been done a lot better. Overall, I do think this is an improvement from all the other ones down on the list. Next is Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. I think of the Nolan Batmans, this is definitely the one that gets the look of Gotham the most correct, the most how I think of it. I don't know why The Dark Knight abandoned the look of this first movie. He uses all these colors, like specifically oranges and like weird tans and shades of yellow, juxtaposed against, you know, really dark nights, no pun intended. And it creates a look of Gotham that I think is much more like the comics than anything that we see in The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises. So I don't know why they abandoned that in the next two movies for like this really kind of blue and gray, like sleeker look to everything. But Batman Begins looks really, really good. And I think another advantage that this movie has is just that it's probably the best origin story we've ever seen for Batman on, certainly in live action. You have the classic story that we all know, where we kind of expose his fears, and then we expose him to villains that really test his specific vulnerabilities with Scarecrow and with Ra's al Ghul. In terms of issues, I mean, I just think that there's a lot of things that this movie focuses on that I really could just do without with. I don't really care about the gadgets of Batman at all, except as like a side piece, and I think this movie just spends a little bit too much time building up not how he becomes Batman in spirit, but how he becomes Batman very much literally. Number 4 is Batman Returns, the second Tim Burton movie. And I watched this the other night right before I went to see the new one, and oh, I loved it. Catwoman could do literally anything to me. She could run me over, and I'd ask her to do it again. In general, with the look of this, it has the same kind of look for the most part to Batman 1989, but I think the fact that it takes place at Christmas really made Tim Burton just kind of go nuts in terms of a lot of the imagery he wanted to throw in, like all of the carnival people, penguins hideout, the zoo thing, all of that looks just really good and really Tim Burton. It feels a little bit like it has one foot in The Nightmare Before Christmas, which I just love. And this has much better writing than the original 1989 Batman. There is more motivation, I think, for the villains. I really love how the Penguin turns Gotham against Batman by framing him for a murder. Of all the really comic booky adaptations, this is the first one where you really kind of see real stakes, real motivations for the central characters. The only issue with it is I think it goes so dark overall. I think it gets a lot closer to kind of the comic book version of Batman in terms of the darkness, but it also really has a lot of cartoony things going on, like the whole speedboat chase and the penguins marching through the city. I think a lot of that really silly stuff juxtaposed against this much darker version doesn't ruin the movie, but it definitely takes me out for a little bit during those scenes. But yeah, again, Catwoman, destroy me. At number 3, I'm gonna go with The Dark Knight, which I think a lot of people would have at the top of their list, and I'll get to my problems with it in a second, but I can't deny that this is a really, really good movie. I think for the most part, this is the Heath Ledger show. Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker is one of the best performances I've ever seen, not just in a superhero movie, but in any film in general. What I love about it so much is that some things that he actually says in it, if you really think about exactly what he says, like the whole thing about, you know, if he were to say that a gangbanger would get shot and nobody would panic, versus an old, you know, one little old mayor will die and then everyone loses their minds. That thing, you know, a lot of the things he says aren't exactly the most logical if you think about them, but it feels that way in the movie because his performance is really just able to make you feel this insane level of dread. And there are a lot of ways in which he legitimately shows the hypocrisies of this city, and that is what the Joker character is supposed to do. He's a symbol of anarchy to expose, you know, the flaws of society. And although I don't think it was executed the best, I do really love that the way that Joker takes the Harvey Dent character and, you know, turns him into Two-Face by making him completely lose faith in the system which he was once a part of. I do think, though, that Harvey Dent's turn into Two-Face was a little bit too exaggerated and it happened too quickly, that it didn't really feel earned. I would compare it to maybe in, like, Revenge of the Sith, when, you know, Anakin, he kills Mace Windu, but then after that he's immediately just killing random children for no reason because Palpatine told him to. It just felt a little bit unearned in that same way. I don't really understand why Two-Face became as violent as he was, you know, right away. And like I said earlier, Gotham just doesn't look as good in this movie as it does in Batman Begins. It has a much more sleek and metallic blue-gray feel to it. And a lot of just the very mundane scenes, they don't look like Gotham, they just look like, you know, New York City or something. So is it the masterpiece that a lot of people think it is? I don't think so, but it is a really damn good movie. Mostly thanks to Heath Ledger's performance. Number 2, here it is, The Batman. Now, maybe I'll review this in full at some time, but I actually think this is a really messy movie. It is 3 hours long. It does not need to be 3 hours long. I won't get too much into spoilers if you haven't seen it, but there is a certain plot that happens that gets a lot of focus about halfway through the film that I really just feel takes away a lot from the strengths of the writing early on in the movie. And because of that, you don't really feel the same kind of dread of the antagonist, in this case the Riddler, that you do in The Dark Knight. But I am willing to forgive those flaws because I think this movie just nailed, and I mean nailed, what Batman should be in a live-action movie. It's always raining in this, and it has that Blade Runner kind of city feel, where it's like a gothic neo-noir sort of thing. I think every character, they really, with, you know, the Riddler, Catwoman, Penguin, Falcone, Batman, Alfred, they really nail the core of what those characters are. I think it was a great idea for the Riddler to be sort of a Zodiac killer type figure, very inspired by like David Fincher movies. And even as a fan of Zodiac, I mean, I did see the comparisons as a little bit on the nose at times, but I didn't really care that much, even as somebody who loves Fincher. And I think this is maybe the best score that's ever been written for a Batman movie, including the Tim Burton one and including the Batman Mask of the Phantasm and the animated series music. It's very flawed, I know, but it is just absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait to go see this again. Number one, though, is I think this one is actually number one by quite a bit, and it's Batman Mask of the Phantasm. I think this is just about as close to a masterpiece as you could come in Batman. It's by far the best portrayal of the city. I think because it's an animated setting, they have total freedom to just do whatever they want with it, and they created a look that is, you know, gothic, neo-noir, and close to that comic book feel. But there isn't that problem of making it really cartoony because it's a cartoon. It literally is an animation. A lot of the weird juxtaposition problems that you get in the live action movies you don't have here. And it also has by far, I think, the best stakes for at least the character of Batman. Bruce Wayne in this movie is essentially the victim of a, you know, a tragic love story. And with the exception of the Batman, none of the other movies really wanted to get into just kind of the sadness and the introversion of the Bruce Wayne character. At least not to the same extent. And I think in Mask of the Phantasm it's executed even better than it is in the Batman. And also what I really love about this is, again, because of the animation, yeah, they're not so worried about, you know, having to just juxtapose this really dark world to kind of more cartoony things that are happening. So for example, there's like this car chase, I think, that happens, and all those action sequences, you know, really ridiculous stuff happens in terms of physics, but it doesn't look nearly as silly in this as it does in, say, Batman and Robin, because it's an animation. We don't have that same sense of reality when it comes to animation that we do for live action films. And they embrace the humor a lot in this as well. Joker is really, really funny. He literally takes his meat and slaps a woman with it. Okay, I know how that sounded. It's baloney, don't worry. But yeah, I think Mask of the Phantasm is, I think it's probably by far the best movie adaptation of Batman. And yeah, that's my Batman rank. I'm curious, let me know what yours is down in the comments. Anyway, that's the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, you can like it down below and subscribe to the channel. I've got more content coming out soon, and I will see you guys in the next one.